Mayor, do you start it off or who starts it off?
As far as the meeting?
Yeah. She said that, she said that they were ready to go.
She did? I'm not sure I heard that.
Oh.
Carol, you're ready to go now?
They can start.
Yes, you can start.
Okay. All right, I will call this Tigard City Council business meeting to order. I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we have special circumstances, are going to be conducting a virtual meeting today. I'm going to ask that you please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. I am not going to be able to see everybody on the screen at once, so I may not be able to see whether you're wishing to speak. I am going to go around and ask everybody for their perspectives to try to manage the communications during the meeting. If you want to speak at other times, please say your name, then wait for me to recognize you before you speak. This will avoid council members talking over each other. Whenever you're speaking or making a motion, please say your name first. All votes will be by roll call. And at the end of the business items, I will read the executive session citation and the council will adjourn at that time. Let's start with roll call. City Recorder Krager.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
Councilor Lube.
Here.
Councilor Anderson.
Here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councilor Turley.
Here.
Okay. Youth Councilor Turley, we did have a little bit of an issue hearing you there, so I don't know how strong your connection is, but maybe double check that if you are able to. And I would ask that everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask you to mute your audio. We're going to display a flag and everybody can participate on their own. Okay, I was going to say, there we go, Mr. Nola. All right, thank you. We'll move on to council and staff, any non-agenda items. City Manager Wine, any non-agenda items from staff?
This is Marty Wine, Mr. Mayor. We have no agenda items from staff tonight.
All right, and then how about from council? Any non-agenda items? I'm going to note that I would like us to discuss what other actions we may want to be taking related to COVID-19 response besides the actions we're taking tonight. So I'm going to encourage us to have some discussion about that point at the end of the agenda before the executive session. So the first item on the agenda is to consider approval of a resolution for fiscal year 2020 special budget supplemental for COVID-19 response. Mr. Kang, are you ready for the staff report? And it looks like Library Director Bernard, Manager Purdy, Senior Planner Warren, and Director Asher will all be available to answer questions.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Steve Kang, Senior Management Analyst from Finance and Information Services. With me presenting will be Lloyd Purdy, Economic Development Manager, Skylar Warren, Senior Planner, Halstead Bernard, Library Department Director. We're here to present the fiscal year 2020 special budget supplemental in response to the COVID-19. The special budget supplemental has two parts. One for the small business assistance and the other is a housing assistance for the houseless community members. Department staff will present each of the two parts. Once they're done with the presentations, I'll provide some funding information. Now I'll turn it over to Lloyd Purdy, who will provide some information on the Tiger Cares program. Lloyd?
Good evening, Council. This is Lloyd Purdy, the Economic Development Manager for the City of Tigard. Hopefully with that introduction, I have done a good sound check. I don't see any objections. I'll move forward. I would like everybody to know that on March 20th, Mayor Snyder encouraged Tigard's economic development team to create a business assistance program that would support the business community in Tigard. He encouraged us to be bold and be impactful. Very quickly, staff developed a program with 5 goals in mind. And that's the program we're going to talk about tonight. The first goal was to complement and not duplicate state and federal programs. It was to focus on equity, targeting the city's limited resources on businesses that are the most vulnerable and most severely challenged during this crisis. We continue by focusing on adding professional financial decision-making by bringing in 2 CDFI partners. The fourth point was to make this whole program about more than just money. The goal was to connect businesses to us, our resources, and in fact, an array of networks, services, tool, and future capital. And fifthly, and the fifth point was to make this a fast and smart delivery system. 10 days later, the city rolled out a uniquely crafted program. We know, and you know, that economic distress now extends throughout the entire community, but our city's resource base is very limited. We had to deal with those hard realities, and so the economic development team developed a thoughtful and I would say very intentional business assistance program targeted on economic stabilization and community support for the businesses who need it the most.
Lloyd, are other people having trouble hearing Mr. Purdy?
No, I can hear him okay.
I can hear him fine. This is Liz.
Mr. Purdy, I'm having difficulty hearing you. I'm trying to figure me or you. Are other people having trouble hearing Mr. Purdy?
I can hear him just fine.
Okay.
I can hear fine.
Mr. Mayor, this is Mike Nolip. He's coming through well in the studio. Your connection sometimes is going in and out.
Okay, I will try to correct that.
Okay.
Yeah, I second that. Yeah, the mayor's is coming in jumbled.
Okay, here's a test. Mayor Snyder, do you have a better audio connection with me right now? I'm looking, head nod will suffice.
I would suggest you just keep going.
Okay.
And I'll work on it.
Okay. So we did face hard realities in developing this program. The idea was that the most vulnerable business people in Tigard actually have limited access to traditional banks, to state and the massive amount of federal support that's heading our way. And the best way for the city to do the most good with the scarce funds was to leverage that funding with our relationships and with the organizations like the CDFIs I'm going to mention in order to support under-resourced entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs that couldn't benefit from federal programs, from state programs, from their connection to the traditional banking system. So I mentioned CDFIs. These are Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs for short. They use federal, private, foundation, and of course now they're using City of Tigard funds to provide banking services like grants, loans, and savings accounts to firms that need support, that don't usually have access to traditional support, and firms that need to build their capacity to move into the traditional banking system. Steve, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide now. We all know that different businesses have different needs, and unlike a simple cash handout program, Tigard Cares offers a range of financial solutions available through our CDFI partners. Working with Micro Enterprise Solutions of Oregon, which we often call MISO, as well as Craft 3, we developed a range of financial support tools to help a wider range of businesses. We also, through their expertise, added professional grant and loan making capability into our process, our business assistance process. Plus, beyond the first round of financial assistance, we are introducing Tigard businesses to the array of networks, services, tools, and future capital that these CDFI partners deal with day in and day out. With our funding, MISO, Micro Enterprise Solutions of Oregon, is making small grants of at least $1,500 and micro loans for as little as $500 to small Tigard firms. This comes along with MISO's standard portfolio of business assistance services. This is a financial assistance that no traditional bank and certainly the Fed would bother to do. We're helping the most vulnerable, the most insecure firms. Additionally, with our funding being used as a loan loss reserve, Craft 3 will be making up to $500,000 in interest in loans for larger businesses, those that need between $10,000 and $50,000 in financial support. Following on, soon on the heels of this program, MISO will open up a loan pool as well, and they'll use some of the money that we've granted to them as a loan loss reserve against SBA funds that can then be lent to Tigard businesses. That's how the city's $300,000 investment has become a $1 million program in financial support. For businesses receiving grants, microloans, and what we would call bridge loans, this financial assistance can be used for fixed expenses such as rent, insurance, fixed operating cost. It can be used for employee retention and like payroll, or even inventory preparedness for when they get ready to restart. Steve, you can move to my last slide, and I'll start to wrap this phase of the presentation up. We received 200 applications for business assistance in the first 24 hours of the program. As of this morning, that number increased to 320 applications, 320 requests for support. Applications from businesses ranged from restaurants and retailers to fitness studios and healthcare providers. Currently, MISO is reviewing 65 applications and will begin making grant awards early next week. Craft 3 will begin accepting more complicated loan applications on Monday, and then proceed through their process and then quickly make loans to firms. So firms will begin receiving the grant component of this program as early as late next week. More than a helpful cash handout program, Tigard Cares is trying to enable economic recovery for firms that might not otherwise survive the COVID-19 crisis. I've explained the bold goals of this program. I've introduced you to our CDFI partners. I've outlined the business assistance tools we're using to support and stabilize our local economy. If you have any questions, we'll answer them later in this presentation before we wrap up the budget supplemental. But in order to continue this online program, right now I'm going to hand the microphone to Halstead Bernard to talk about the next program, the Housing Assistance Program. We will take questions later.
Hello, everyone. This is Halstead Bernard. I'm the director of the Tigard Public Library. It's so good to be with you virtually this evening. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So as Lloyd has just started to talk about, we have just shared some ways to help ease this burden for our most vulnerable and underserved community members during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I would like to continue this sentiment by proposing our idea for providing emergency support to our neighbors experiencing homelessness. We have spoken with the executive directors of 2 of our local non-governmental organizations who provide services to unhoused community members, this Just Compassion and the Good Neighbor Center. And while these organizations continue to do their best to serve with the new physical distancing constraints in place, they are no longer able to utilize volunteers or rely on donated meals and supplies as they did just 1 short month ago. They have also drastically increased needs for sanitizing supplies, personal protective equipment, thermometers, and more, so that they can keep their guests not only sheltered, but healthy. And when their spaces are at capacity and physical distancing must be employed, they need to provide more hotel vouchers for their most vulnerable guests. So with these considerations, the best way to provide emergency resources to our unhoused community members is to offer $100,000 of city funds in the form of 2 one-time contracts for up to $50,000 apiece. Then the city can select 2 local non-governmental organizations with the infrastructure and the expertise who can provide us with concrete budgets and timelines for how and when this emergency funding might be used. So what I've outlined for you just now is the most effective way to help the people who need it most when they need it right now. And I will be happy to answer any questions you might have at the end of this presentation.
Hi, this is Steve Kang again. Now I'll discuss a little bit of the funding information on those 2 programs. The Tiger Cares program will be funded by 2 sources. First one is business license revenue. The Tiger Municipal Code permits the first $206,000 of the business license revenue each year to be used for general purposes. The remainder of the business license revenue is allocated to the commercial crimes unit in the police department. This code will allow us to allocate this $206,000 over to the Tiger Cares program. The remaining $94,000 of the funding will come from the general fund's $1 million emergency reserve. The funding for the houseless assistance will come from the emergency reserve as well. In total, the fiscal year 2020 special supplemental will increase the budget by $400,000 in general fund. $194,000 will be coming from the general fund's reserves, and the remainder will be from the general fund contingency. Staff is recommending the approval of resolution implementing the special budget supplemental. Now that's the end of the prepared statements, and we're available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And can I just verify that my audio is now better than it was before? Can people hear me okay?
Yes, better.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad we were able to resolve that. Sorry for that. Let's start with questions from Council President Goodhouse.
Yes, I have a handful. So should I just do a couple of them, or should I jump into all my questions?
Why don't we go person by person? But let's focus on the business assistance first as a topic. Why don't you provide your questions, and then we'll go questions, then we'll go to comment or, you know, other deliberations. So Council President Goodhouse, why don't you go with questions about the business assist or the CARES program? Okay. So I have a couple of questions, and I kind of comment. One part that I've heard, and I was trying to gather some information today and got some of it, not as much. But what I'm hearing is that people that are restaurants that have more than 500,000 in sales are not qualifying for it or being denied, or if they have more than 10 employees. So the problem is if they have part-time employees and it adds up to over 10 employees, that they don't qualify. And if they happen to be a franchise where, for example, Forenza that's over off of Shoals or Beach Hut, where they happen to be an individual owner, they're not qualifying as well. That's a couple of them. And then I wanted to know offhand how many people have been declined or not qualified
based off of that, and how many, I think a bunch of people may not be applying for those because of those reasons as well.
So Lloyd, or I mean, is there? I'm going to guess we don't have answers to questions about how many people have been denied because they haven't even started processing, or they just started processing requests. Correct?
Mayor, you're correct. Council President Goodhouse, those are great questions. I can take a moment or two to answer them for you.
That'd be great.
To the mayor's response, we don't yet know who hasn't qualified because these very small $1,500 grants has just started doing on Monday. So we're asking firms to begin the application process. So we don't yet know who hasn't made it through, but we will know. We're keeping track of every firm that applies. They only get an invitation to apply for the very small $1,500 grant program if they first come to us through our intake form, and we route them to MISO. So for instance, I've routed, I think it's about 150 businesses to MISO. Those were the businesses that requested a $1,500 grant to save their business during this crisis. Not all of them will be eligible. The idea was to help the most vulnerable businesses, to help the businesses that wouldn't have access to federal programs or state programs. This program is meant to fill a niche and do what those programs can't or won't do. So we had to be restrictive given the limited amount of money we had with which businesses we were able to support. So those criteria that Council President Goodhouse referenced, they are the criteria for the small grant program. They're not the same criteria for the loan program. But if a business came to me and said through our online form, hey, I need $1,500, we had to be and we continue to have to be very judicious about who we can award funding to through MISO. MISO is reviewing 65 applications. That uses up almost all the money they have for grants. We're resource constrained. We worked with the best budget we had. In fact, we took a small number of 300,000, we grew it into almost $1 million. But on the small grants, there's a limited amount of people we can help with $1,500. The idea was to get that in the hands of the people that would help the most. If I answered your questions sufficiently, Councilman Goodhouse, or do you have more on those points about?
I guess on those points, some of those restaurants are ones that run on tight margins. So if they go over that 500,000 mark, I guess it would be interesting to see later on what list of people do qualify for that, because a lot of these ones that they have part-time employees plus full-time employees that either makes it so they don't qualify, or they're running on tight margins and they're over that 500,000. They still are those ones that are drastically in need. So I'd be interested to see which ones are qualifying then with those parameters.
Sure, we will get these, I would call them after action reports. We'll get reports from our CDFI partners about who they were able to support, and we can cross-reference that with the list I'm keeping, the referral list. Again, with a limited amount of money, we had to be very particular, and the idea was to help the firms that couldn't qualify for SBA support or state support. And the guidance from our partners like MISO and Craft 3 was if a business is making more than $500,000 in sales, they're probably big enough and sophisticated enough to either find commercial lending support or access the SBA's EIDL fund, which I think everybody knows about, but that's the large amount of money coming from the Fed that's going to be able to help most businesses. Again, our program's filling a niche of the underserved, underbanked, the firms that probably won't have access to these bigger, more well-funded programs. So yes, we've had to be selective about who we can support with this money.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's go to questions and comments from Youth Councilor Turley.
I don't have any in the moment, but thank you for the amount of work that you put into this. It's really appreciated.
All right, let's go to Counselor Anderson.
Hi, Lloyd. Is there a deadline for the application phase?
Good question, Councilman Anderson. We intentionally did not, I'm getting some feedback, sorry. We intentionally did not set a deadline. We didn't want this to be a first come, first serve program like some cities did. That usually benefits inordinately people who are well connected to the normal systems. So we have kept the program open, even though I know we're about to meet capacity, and I think in fact I know we will be oversubscribed. We'll have more demand than we have funding for. Definitely on the grants, probably on the loans, but we have not yet. We didn't set a deadline. We haven't set a window. We are continuing to accept applications, and I continue to refer them to our partners. In fact, tomorrow I'll be referring 100 plus requests to Craft 3, or at least getting those businesses ready for their loan applications through Craft 3. So a long way to say we haven't created a deadline or set a deadline.
Do they know that there's overwhelming response and maybe the odds of coming in late at this point won't help them?
Well, we've tried to make it so that coming in late doesn't hinder you. In the small grant program, that was a fast move. We tried to move as quickly as we could. So for the $1,500 program for each business, yeah, there is probably we've been oversubscribed so quickly. So yeah. We did update the website today to let businesses know that we are oversubscribed on just that small grant program.
Great.
That's yet the case for the loans. So again, we're trying to keep things open through a window.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
And I should say that every time a business contacts me to say that they did not qualify, I get emails now daily, not just that people need assistance, but that they tried to apply for the grant program and they weren't eligible. I let them know that I can put them back in the list, the roster for the loan programs. So we're trying to still meet their needs, even if they weren't eligible for that $1,500 grant that went so quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Newton.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me, Lloyd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my question is, well, I have a couple of questions. The purpose of this program was to help businesses that might not have been eligible for the federal or state program. Could you just give me some high-level examples of what you're talking about? Why somebody would benefit from this and not be able to benefit from the state or federal programs? I mean, I think if this is going to work well, that's great, because the federal and state and local shouldn't be competing with each other. But it would be just helpful as you were going into this. What kinds of things did you think people were going to be looking for assistance with?
Right.
Or is
Right.
it the size of the business that makes them a better fit for the local program?
Yes, the local program, the intent is to complement what we think or 2 weeks ago was going to come in from the federal program, or what we know businesses could access through their normal traditional banks. So some of this was developing the local program without the benefit of knowing who would be eligible for the SBA's EIDL, their economic injury disaster loan fund, or their payroll protection fund. So some of this we had to do with some guesswork. We do know that in times of crisis, businesses that are small, that are underbanked, that are women-led, that are led by entrepreneurs of color, they typically have a harder time accessing the traditional bank loans, which is where some of this federal money is going through, like the payroll protection program, or even getting access to the SBA funding. So we stood this program up knowing that traditionally those are the businesses that are the most vulnerable. So we knew it would be the smaller businesses. We knew it would be those that have less access to banking. And that's in fact why we brought in these two partners, MISO and CDFI. They have expertise in connecting with and serving businesses that are underbanked, businesses that are smaller, businesses that are run by women and minorities. So that was some of the thought as to why we focused so significantly on small businesses and vulnerable businesses.
And so it's not like it's that businesses that would be eligible for the federal SBA programs would not be applying for this, but the businesses applying for this might be asking for the same types of things: help with utilities, help with payroll. Is that the case? So people aren't going to want to apply for this, be eligible for a federal program, because they don't want to be getting payroll protection from two sources. Is that correct? Or
yes, there's truth in what you're saying. I would say it this way. In Tigard, every business deserves a chance. This is a way for us to give those small businesses a chance. Any business that can access SBA funds, they need to do that and make sure we can help the businesses that won't have that benefit. So every time I hear from a business that says I couldn't access that $1,500 grant, I made sure to tell them I still want you to apply for the SBA funding. We're doing our best to make sure businesses have access to all the programs. The local funding fills a niche.
Okay.
It's trying to give a chance to, it's trying to open up some opportunity for those businesses that don't always have that chance.
Okay. And then the last question I have really isn't for Lloyd, and it's probably a bigger question for a bigger time. I know COVID-19 and our community response to this, it's important, it's immediate, and it needs to be, but we're looking at pulling $260,000 from the business license fees that could go into the general fund, and another $94,000, another $100,000 from reserves, which I understand we need to be flexible, but I'm concerned going forward, that's going to really impact our finances, and I think we need to be nimble and we need to respond as quickly as we can, but this is going to have an impact on us down the road, and so I think the council needs to be wary of that and understand that, I don't think this is the first amount of money that we're going to be spending on COVID-19 if this goes forward, and I'm concerned as we go into budget season, we're going to need to start looking at what other things we might need to direct staff to take a look at so that we can move forward, and sustain our basic services. So maybe that's an editorial comment, but I'm concerned about, I understand the need, but I'm concerned about the impacts on our reserves with, these expenses. So that's all I'll say about that. We can talk about it in depth later.
All right, Councilor Lube, questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Purdy, I have a question in regards to kind of the accountability piece of it. Do you have a system in place for how we're going to be reported back to the city and to the council on how the money is being used and who is being helped, so we get some information back and some assurances that it's going to the places that we're intending it to be going to those vulnerable people and businesses?
Right, good question. The answer is yes. First off, we were judicious in our selection of these partners. The CDFI partners I mentioned, Micro Enterprise Solutions of Oregon and Craft 3, they do this every day and they do it professionally. So I have utmost confidence that they're the right system for delivering this money to the businesses that we need to be helping right now. I've been doing and will continue to do every other day check-ins with these partners. So right now we're at the phase where we're ramping up and we're doing daily check-ins. And in fact, in our last meeting, actually our Thursday meeting last week, I talked to them about the reporting that we would need along the way as we're moving through this, as well as reports at the end. They've added to their intake forms a note that lets businesses know that their applications will be public. We won't release specifics about a company, but we'll be able to aggregate. For instance, we know right now of the 65 applications that MISO is working on. For instance, we know that 44% of those applicants are from women-led businesses, and 34% are from minority or entrepreneurs of color. So we are already tracking some of those statistics. We'll be able to track the size of firms that are being assisted by their net sales and a couple other qualifiers. So we'll be able to track the programs both for the grant money, for the loan money, and an in-between category of micro loans. So yes, we have that understanding with those partners. And they're used to doing this because they're used to dealing with SBA funds that come into their funding pool, Oregon Community Foundation funds that tap into that, and other public funds. So they're used to that level of due diligence and reporting. Does that give you some confidence in your answer to your question? I mean.
Yes, it does, and I appreciate that you were looking for other ways in order for this program to get off the ground, and going to the experts who already have the infrastructure in place to be able to quickly handle this and be able to manage it is really something that's been great. And again, it's something that won't be back on the city kind of as a burden of having to navigate and just sort of take care of the program. And so I really like the idea of going through these partnerships. Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of general questions. Would it be best to wait until the end to ask those after we talk with the library director?
You can make the comments. I mean, are they related to either of these two funding packages?
They're kind of just general comments about funding and those things. They're not specific to either these two.
Go, I would say go for it now.
Okay. So my question, I guess, the first general question I have is this all of the money that we have available for a system like this, or is this initially a first pass of what we think is the most vulnerable populations who need help now, and we're going to be going into a second phase of what else we can do after this?
So that does seem like a pertinent question to this topic. Exactly. Mr. Purdy and/or City Manager Wine, I'm going to guess that you guys, the city leadership teams had some discussion about that.
Mr. Mayor, this is City Manager Wine. Yes, we've had preliminary conversations about this program and about other needs in the community. And I'll just echo what Councilor Newton said, which is this is probably not the last investment that the city will make in COVID-19 response. We don't have a specific phase 2 tranche of funding ready or proposed at this point. So is this all the question that Councilor Lube asked? Some of this is going to also relate to the comment that Councilor Newton put forward a moment ago. And Mr. LaFrance will also be able to speak to this just from a financial standpoint. The city is going to need to balance our reserves and how we spend them over time to sustain or maintain city services, and how we feel it's best for the city to invest in this response. So in some ways, what we've done is followed the lead of the cities around us in terms of making emergency and immediate business assistance available. But as you know about the city reserves, those are not going to be unlimited and immediately, or they won't be available forever. Once we use them, they'll be done. So I think we will have a next phase of a conversation about is there another investment that you want to make? Maybe this will also come up on non-agenda items. I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but this is our first chapter. We don't have a second chapter yet defined to bring forward to you. But we also don't know how long this emergency is going to last, you know, what we're doing right now is responding to the immediate need.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lube, do you have other questions or comments?
You know, yes, it's really, really hard to predict how this is going to happen and how this is going to unfold and continue to impact our community members in all various different areas. And I have some concerns that I feel like, you know, we are potentially also missing out on a huge population of just general city residents who are furloughed or unemployed and having trouble, you know, paying certain bills. And yes, unemployment, if they're able to get it, covers 60%. But I think that there's a lot of our community members who were stretched beforehand. And I know that there's, you know, ways to be assisted, but I worry about us having conversations specifically about the business community and the homeless community without also talking about the broader scape of everybody else in our community. Because I know, you know, as some of you know, my house is one that's also impacted financially. And I have some protection and some savings that I can cover, but I know how stressed out I am about paying my bills, and that includes, you know, the city bills and the house bills and food and all of those things. And I can't imagine what our other community members are going through, just struggling to pay, you know, their utilities and those things. And I wonder if this is the best way for the funds that we have to be reaching the most community members. You know, I think the business, the micro grants are fantastic because they're filling that need, but are there other needs that we should also be looking at filling in a broader scope of things? So that's my concern. Does that sort of give some context?
Absolutely. Thank you for adding and sharing that. I think it's important perspective. And I think that should come up as we discuss what other actions might we want to take or consider in the immediate future. Maybe not acting tonight, but giving staff direction around what we would like to see in the next. Okay, if everybody's okay with it, I'd like to move on to the discussion about the homeless or houseless support. And Councilor Lube.
Councilor Goodhouse, can I ask one more just while we're topics?
Sure.
One, can I, this is for Lloyd, can we put something on the site that asks people to, or part of the city communication, ask them to apply even if they're not qualified or feel like they're qualified?
Yes, Councilman Goodhouse, that's the way the program has been set up, that we ask people to, I do an intake, I call it a referral form, and we haven't asked for any criteria at that phase. So I'm getting every let's call it every expression of need. I've gotten that, and that's 350 applicants. Some people are doing multiple applications, but let's round it to 320 applications. Those were all received by us without anybody knowing if they would be accepted or rejected. That phase comes after I route them to either MISO for a small $1,500 grant, or as I'll be doing tomorrow, routing them to Craft 3. So we are doing that, and we can continue to do that. Does that help you?
I think with our social media or a post that maybe says apply either way or something like that, we're putting it out there and asking people to apply, but someone maybe looks at it and decides not to apply. If we want to ask people to apply no matter what, whether or not they feel they're qualified, or even if they go through the questions. If it's on there, then that's good enough, but I thought maybe
that's
to make
what we're doing.
Okay, perfect. And then one other thing, just because we're having a lot of conversation and what we want or not, I know these are hard times, but I think as a city, when things get hard like this or a crisis comes up, we might want to figure out a way to maybe get the council together as soon as we start talking about a program like this to discuss amongst ourselves, really craft it and have an understanding of it. I know things are moving a mile an hour, and And you guys are doing a lot. You're doing a great job. But I think we might, we don't know how long this is going to last. But anything else that comes up like this, I think maybe find a way to do a conversation or talk about these things as soon as they start happening. And one last question: with the business license money, is that going to take away from funding from the commercial crimes unit, or is that going to still be taken care of the same way?
This is Steve Kang. The $206,000 is set aside for general services. It will not impact commercial crimes unit. It's still fully funded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move us on because we are way over time at this point for, I think, this agenda item. Councillor Lube, questions or comments on the housing support?
Yes, Library Director Bernard, I was wondering how you came up with the program of it being split between two recipients, and then kind of specifically a little bit more, what are the funds going to be used for? Do we have an idea how many community members are going to be impacted with this? And then did the groups come to you for this funding? Is this something that the city went to the groups for? How was it determined that of all of the options out there, this would be the best one to help the homeless community?
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Lube. So initially, I reached out to Vernon Baker. I was at Good Neighbor Center because I have existing relationships with them. As you know, being a part of a public library, we have very close relationships with our local shelters, and I wanted to know how they were faring in this time, and the idea of having some emergency funding to support directly what they were experiencing, especially with social distancing or physical distancing, as we're now supposed to call it, in play. So that was originally why I reached out to those specific organizations. I had existing relationships with them, and I knew that they were already dealing with an increased load with the same capacity. So far as your other questions about the splitting it between two groups, so initially we thought about a proposal about kind of dividing the $100,000 amount between a three-pronged approach versus $50,000 for two groups. And the three-pronged approach was really initially talking about bolstering the funding for non-governmental local organizations, but also exploring some other possible programs. But initially, we just kept coming back to the idea that these organizations are the ones who are best positioned. They have the expertise, they have the existing relationships in the community to support people who are currently experiencing homelessness and greatly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, for lack of a better phrase, we thought it might be the best to increase the amount of funding that they had access to. Did I answer those questions?
Yes, kind of. I think one of my other questions is, do we have any idea of how many community members will be helped with this $100,000? Or kind of specifically more what this money is going to be going towards? I know, we're going to be giving it to this organization. And you talked a little bit earlier about kind of things that they needed, but I was wondering if they had sort of a plan on how this was going to be used and how many people are going to be impacted. I just find it sort of difficult to say, here's $50,000, kind of do what you need to do with it, especially being budget constrained and having a lot of need in our community.
Absolutely, Councillor Lube, thank you so much for bringing that up. It's really important to note that initially the idea was for us to name organizations and give them that funding. Instead, the proposal as it has changed is to really ask for local organizations to apply to get this funding, because in this moment of greatest need, unfortunately, the people who are doing the hard work right now are they don't have as clear of a picture. They weren't able to give us as clear of a picture as I would like to have presented to you about what exactly could be done with this funding. So I thought instead of, we could then turn it around and ask people to apply, have very clear timelines and budget allocations that are presented to the city, and the city can then choose the organizations to give that funding to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Director Bernard, does that mean that is the proposal on the table now? I mean, I know I had gotten some input from the city manager about that, but I want to make sure I'm clear. Is the proposal or what we're being asked to approve now just an amount of money, or is it an amount of money that's going to be specifically directed to those 2 community organizations?
Mayor Snyder, it's an amount of money that we would then ask for community organizations to, and 2 only, we would put the call out so that we would be able to award 2 individual amounts of no more than $50,000 apiece. But it's not only these 2 organizations that I've mentioned in my proposal. These were the 2 that I knew were doing the hard work right now and who I knew needed extra funding.
I would add Packed with Pride to your list of groups that are doing that kind of work. And frankly, I'm not sure that we need to think of it as only 2. I would think that maybe shouldn't be any more than maybe 4, but I would encourage us to think a little more flexibly as appropriate. You know, they're delivering food to 800 of the most vulnerable families in the community right now. And that's a huge, and they didn't even, I mean, I don't think that group existed a month ago, and they're doing phenomenal work. So
thank you for telling me about them. I will definitely include them on my list. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Lube, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Newton.
Okay, now I have some questions. So if we're going to open it up to appropriate agencies in the community, I'm the city's representative on the Community Development Block Grant Policy Advisory Board, and we just went through the grant process. We're going to be awarding grants Thursday night, making official our grant awards, and there are some Tigard-based agencies that probably won't get funded. And my concern on the PAB, I'm very concerned about our homeless population, but I'm getting equally concerned about our borderline might be homeless population. Our folks that are living in housing that, to echo what Councilor Lube said, are 1 utility bill away from being homeless. They're food insecure. So I feel like if we're going to open it up to more organizations, maybe we need some side rails around it, because although I think our homeless population and those folks that provide those services are great, I'm starting to get a lot more concerned about people that are, the investment in some of these folks is just 3 months of a utility bill, which in the scheme of things might help a lot more of our population for an equal dollar cost. So if we're going to do something where we're going to make grant awards available, it seems like we need to figure out exactly who we want. If we want to focus, broaden the net a little, are we talking about people who are currently homeless? Are we talking about people that are food insecure being our priority? I'm feeling a little unsure as to the direction we're going if we're now opening it up to other agencies, which I support, but it feels like we need some sort of maybe broad criteria about how we're going to award these funds. Because I just went through this process and reviewed 36 applications, and only about 10 of them are going to be funded. So there's a lot of need out.
Well, I think the intent here, Councilor Newton, is to make the budget award and then have and we can provide input, but we've given quite a bit of authority right now to our staff to try to address some of these things, and perhaps we want to provide our individual input off, not during a meeting, and have our staff manage that. Just the timing of all this, I don't know that we have the luxury of having a robust council series of meetings and dialogue.
And I don't disagree, but if we're going to make $100,000 available, maybe we should make $100,000 available and have people apply for it. You know, I mean, to say it's going to be 2 or 3, that's what I'm saying. Let's open it up. If we're going to open it up, we can set an amount. We can talk about the things that I support us moving forward as quickly as possible. But if we're going to do 250,000, I'm just getting, it feels like we're derailing a little and kind of confused. So 100,000 to be made available, I'm more comfortable if it's open to folks, that these agencies that provide services to homeless or, you know, people in need that are near homelessness. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Anything else, Councillor Newton?
That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Anderson.
Well, I kind of agree with the discussion as it's going. Just Compassion and Good Neighbor Center are great local partners, but I think that we could expand it a little bit. So that's my only comment.
Youth Councillor Tilly.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pact with Pride would be a great additional resource to add into there. They're doing a lot of great work as well.
Council President Goodhouse.
I have a couple questions. One thing that popped up when we were talking about how it's going to be awarded or what's going to be done, I'm kind of flashing back to with the Tiger Cares, and we were with that program. Lloyd was saying that we were giving to those organizations that couldn't qualify for federal or for the SBA. And I know through the SBA with a lot of the grants or the payroll protection program or loans or all that, that nonprofits and all those all do qualify for that. So are we going to take that into consideration before we give that money? If that's something that they already can be taken care of, will we take a look at that and maybe look at the organizations in the same way that we are looking at Tiger Cares and give to those organizations that may not do it? And I also know there's going to be additional money through the CDBG that's going to be given, passed through that. There's going to be additional money added to that. I'll pass on to those organizations as well. That's just one question. I have another question.
Well, let's talk about that one first, because that's a complicated one. I think the first thing I would say, and I don't know if staff want to respond as well, but this $100,000 in my mind is distinctly different from the other types of nonprofit support we're talking about, because the intention of this $100,000 is to allow them to expand services and provide more resources to our homeless, rather than them just trying to sustain their payroll to stay as they currently are, because, for example, their inbound revenue from donations has decreased because of the pandemic or whatever it is. I don't know. I guess I want to hear what the staff's response is, but that's my initial gut reaction. The purposes are pretty different.
Okay, I just want to clarify that, at least when we're looking at comparing programs.
Do any staff want to weigh in on what I just said in response to Council President Goodhouse?
Mr. Mayor, this is Smarty One.
Yes.
I would also ask Library Director Bernard to speak to this. I believe that our intent with this funding is, as you noted, which is that we understand that there are going to be needs in the community for people who are already homeless, in danger of becoming homeless. Agencies would be able to serve more of that community need as a result of this funding being available. So, and I think that a worthy conversation by the council is also what kind of an impact do you want for this to have? I know that it's not a lot of funding, but to Councillor Newton's point about criteria, I think the idea was to help the human needs that these agencies would be serving or supporting in our community.
Director Bernard?
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what City Manager Wine said. This was intended to be funding that would help these distinct organizations provide even more capacity and more service during this time. So this is less of a funding so people can keep things afloat as status quo, but we're in extenuating circumstances, and the hope would be that they would be able to serve even more people who are either on the cusp of homelessness or who are experiencing homelessness.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Council President Goodhouse, do you have a second question?
Yeah, I have a second question. I know the original proposal that City Manager Wine had sent out, there was broke down into sections where it was going to be hotel vouchers, there was going to be given to organizations, and there was something to do with the library parking lot, kind of do with safe parking. That's been changed, but coming back to Councilor Lube, where people might need to be in need. I brought up something, I don't know if staff looked at it, but Washington County with the transit lodging tax did give all the hotels in the area money to basically pay for the rooms or take care of the loss. So they have rooms that have been paid for or they've been given money. I don't know if it's something that if we reach out to those hotels to see if any rooms can be given to the city to provide shelter for people maybe who have been displaced during this time, or can be an extra resource.
Councilor Goodhouse, Skylar Warren, Senior Planner.
Yes.
I was able to contact Carolyn McCormick, the director of the Washington County Visitors Association, to get some clarity on your questions related to the transient lodging tax. She indicated that the support that went out to the hotels was, though it was presented in terms of the average rooms per hotel that it was funding, the intent of the money was to support staff, maintaining staff on payroll, even with reduced service. And so it wasn't necessarily intended to subsidize rooms. And she provided a copy of the letter that went out to the hotel. I'll share that with you and the rest of the councilors if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. And to wrap up, and then I'll pass it over to you, Mayor. One thing I just say is, since we're accessing the emergency fund that was set up years ago, I would say that down the road that we look at some time and making a line item that adds back to the emergency fund. So in the future, we do take care of emergencies or areas like this again.
Okay. Staff, please take that note for discussion during the budget process. Is there a motion on resolution number 20-18?
Mr. Mayor, real quick, I just want to ask one clarifying question. I think I heard City Manager Wines say, or maybe it was Director Bernard say, that this funding would go to agencies to expand the number of people they were going to be serving, not to maintain a level that they have. So as long as that's clear, is that what I heard? Is that correct? We're trying to give them the ability to expand services, serve more people. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilor Newton, that is correct.
Thank you.
So I move for the approval of resolution 20-18.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Carol, it's been moved by Councilor Anderson and seconded by Councilor Newton. Would you please conduct a roll call vote?
Could you verify who moved first?
Councilor Anderson moved, Councilor Newton seconded, and I guess technically you should read the number and title of the resolution. Sorry.
Yeah, yes, resolution number 2018, a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2020 special budget supplemental for COVID-19 response, including budget adjustments to policy and administration. I'll conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
Councilor Newton?
Yes.
Counselor Lube,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, resolution number 20-18 passes unanimously. Thank you. And I would ask staff to take the spirit of what our council discussion and dialogue just was and use it to implement particularly what I would say is the less defined $100,000 for homeless and social services as best you can. And we will move on to item number 3 on our agenda, which is consideration of a resolution enacting a moratorium on residential and commercial evictions and providing a time frame for tenants to become current. Mr. Warren, staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and councilors. I'm Skylar Warren, Senior Planner with the Department of Community Development. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see the presentation okay?
No.
No.
No, we see Councilor Newton.
Yeah, hi.
Okay.
We saw your team screen, Mr. Warren, I think, not the presentation slide, sorry.
Okay. Okay, how about now?
Nope.
No, we've got the content can't be displayed, unable to download the file error message.
I can see it, but again, I don't know if it's because I'm on a desktop computer.
Mr. Nola,
I can't see it.
I can see it, but I'm on a desktop, so.
Hey, Skylar, will you do, when you select present screen, hit screen number 1 and then full screen your presentation?
Okay, how about that one?
I got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So I'm here tonight to present to the council a resolution to enact a moratorium on residential and commercial evictions. I know that the council has seen 2 memos already circulated by staff regarding eviction moratoria. So some of this information will be a repeat, but I think it bears repeating and sets the context for any action the council may choose to take this evening. We are in the midst of a public health emergency unlike anything seen in over 100 years. While outbreaks of this kind are not unprecedented, the scope and speed of the spread have led to an unprecedented and precipitous decrease of economic activity in our city as throughout the world. Emergency declarations and policy actions to promote social distancing at the federal, state, and local level will help to slow the spread, preserve the capacity of our healthcare system, and protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The public health emergency caused by the outbreak of COVID-19 and the associated measures to contain it are both having a profound economic effect on local businesses. Particularly hard hit is the service industry and the retail sector of the local economy, including restaurants, personal services, and non-food retail. These businesses and their employees are facing a great economic unknown with little to no income and mounting financial obligations. One of the primary financial obligations for each is the payment of rent, and so the loss of income directly endangers their ability to maintain their housing or place of business. For the employees, many of whom are renters and live paycheck to paycheck, the loss of income means there is greater difficulty in paying their housing costs. The loss of housing for anyone during the public health emergency creates greater risk for everyone, both the individual and the community. For families with children at home, Loss of housing means the loss of the opportunity to participate in remote learning, thereby increasing the detrimental impacts of the public health emergency on those children. A survey of local businesses indicated that the inability to pay rent was one of their top 3 concerns right now. Losing the lease on a business location can have a major impact not only on the business itself, but the broader community. Once the public emergency is over, Tigard will rely on the capacity of its business community to restart economic activity, providing necessary services and employment to the public. If businesses shutter due to the loss of their location, the impacts will harm the city's ability to recover. These reasons, a number of agencies have taken steps to protect tenants, both residential and commercial. Local examples include Beaverton, which enacted a moratorium on residential evictions on March 17th. Similar action was taken a week later by Sherwood, which included commercial tenants as well. And certain provisions of the CARES Act at the federal level provide incentives for multifamily property owners with federally backed mortgages to defer payments in exchange for halting evictions. With all of these actions, the council may be asking why the city might want to consider its own moratorium. One reason is that the city's moratorium is tied to the local declaration of emergency and allows the city greater latitude and control over the endpoint of the moratorium. Another is that the state action does not include provisions for a recovery period. A recovery period has been a common element in the local moratoria, with each city providing a period of 6 months after the conclusion of the emergency for a tenant to become current. The last is that the local action extends greater protections to residents whose housing is subsidized by the Housing Authority of Washington County or local incentives such as SDC exemptions or nonprofit tax exemptions for affordable housing. That group is at particular risk as lost housing is not as easily recovered. In addition, the resolution prohibits lodging discrimination against community members subsidized by the county or city and who may be subsidized by any of the actions in the earlier budget action. So thank you. And at this point, I'll take any questions.
Council President Goodhouse, questions?
No.
Youth Councilor Turley, questions or comments?
Yeah, I would just move to strongly support this. I think it's really important, particularly the online learning aspect. TTSD is shifting to doing online school next week, and so I think this would be really beneficial to helping students feel secure in their homes during this really unprecedented time.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
I would just like to see some language in the resolution for on or before 6 months, and any partial payments I think would help the landlords as well. Say if you could have $500 this month and then $500 the next month, that would kind of help the landlords pay their mortgages. I know the multifamily federally, the Fannie Mae and the Freddie Macs are insured right now, but that's probably only about 40, maybe 50% of the apartments that are out there. So some of these aren't going to be insured. So if you could get some kind of partial payment just to encourage that, so people know that, you know, it's not all or nothing. That's my only comment. And good job, Skylar.
Skylar, how difficult would that be to make that type of adjustment?
I don't think that we have a good precedent for it in terms of the actions that have been taken in other cities. You know, it could be that if council wanted to make that part of the resolution, that 6 month period could be defined in such a way that the tenant would be expected to, prorate the amount of back rent that they owe, or make alternative arrangements with their landlord. And I would defer to City Attorney Rahala about how to actually fit that into the resolution.
And so if we want to talk, if we want to take action tonight and we want that in it, that would probably delay our ability to take action tonight.
Councilor, if you give me just a couple minutes, I think there's language in section 4 is where we talk about the 6 months, and I can certainly try to craft an amendment to that.
Okay, that would be great. Can we continue on with other comments then, City Attorney, while you're doing that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Councilor Anderson, anything else?
No.
Councilor Newton.
I don't really have any questions. I do think I'd like to, I tend to agree with Councilor Anderson. I think if we could put that in, that would be great. But I think this is important legislation, so I think we need to move forward tonight. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it may be as simple as saying, and I guess I'll try this out on you and Councilor Anderson. What about language that says, tenants will make reasonable payments as they're able to, or something like that? Would that be helpful to your point, Councilor Anderson?
I think so, that we should encourage that, just so the landlord knows that it's not all or nothing.
Yeah. Councilor Newton, would that help your perspective too?
I just think we can do it, encourage that. And I don't want to set up a situation where people feel like the landlord's going to be bugging them if they don't really have any resources. But yeah, I think that's fine. Anything that would help people understand that, if you've got something that you can pay this month, but nothing that next month, pay what you can. So.
Okay.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Council President Goodhouse.
I do have one question, because I recall back to when we were doing the we did a recommendation for the governor to do no evictions, but it was stated that where our authority started and stopped. How far does our authority go on this to really be able to tell a landlord or someone for non-eviction, or to tell a commercial landlord what they can or can't do with the rent, or any of those areas? I mean, if we pass this, does this commercial landlord say, well, that isn't, you guys don't have the authority to do that?
Well, with anything, the city attorney may want to weigh in too, but I'll try to take a quick stab at this. That, anything we try to impose, someone can try to challenge, and this is certainly one where there could be some arguments made, but that hasn't stopped other local jurisdictions from doing this. And I think it's an important statement to be made about the importance that we feel as a council and as a city on this point. Whether we would win in a 3-year protracted litigation, I think, is always a question. And so I don't know if we want to get into more of it than that. City Attorney Rahala, do you want to comment, or did I, or City Manager Wine, or do you feel like I covered that okay?
Mr. Mayor, I think you covered it appropriately.
Okay. I just wanted to ask.
Councilor Lube.
I don't have any follow-up questions, but I do support the addition that Councilor Anderson and also Councilor Newton support. I think that's important language to say, if you have some funds, to continue to pay towards it. I do think that this is important, but I also worry about the people who have to pay the mortgages on the other side, trying to make it work as well. It's, I think this is an incredibly difficult situation for every single person in this country, and there's no great solution for everybody right now. So I support the addition.
Thank you, Councilor Lube. With that, unless there are further comments, I would entertain a motion on resolution number 20-19.
Councilor Lube, I move to approve resolution number 20-19 with the discussed additions and changes that hopefully City Attorney Rahala is going to discuss.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, Councilor Lube.
Yeah,
we
should we
probably
wait?
go to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we should probably.
I will
go to
retract my motion.
Sorry, I led you into that. Sorry,
Yeah.
City Attorney Rahala.
Yes, Council. So I would propose replacing this first sentence in section 4 so that it would now read, nothing in this moratorium shall relieve tenants of liability for unpaid rent, which landlords may seek and tenants must pay in installments or in full as soon as practicable, but no later than within 6 months after the expiration of the City of Tigard's declaration of emergency.
That sounds brilliant to me. Councilor Anderson and Councilor Newton, does that meet your needs?
Sounds
That
good.
is good. Very good.
Okay. Okay. Councilor Lube, do you want to try the motion again?
Sure. I move to approve resolution number 20-19 with the additions from City Manager Rahala, or City Attorney Rahala, sorry.
Okay, that's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Lube and seconded by Councilor Newton. Any further discussion? City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution number 20-19. And this resolution will be voted on as amended. A resolution prohibiting actions to initiate eviction proceedings against residential and commercial tenants impacted by the COVID-19 public health emergency as amended. I'll conduct a vote.
Yes, wow, my mouth is full. Carol, please conduct a roll call vote.
All right, Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
Councilor Newton.
Yes.
Councilor Lube.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Yes.
And Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Okay. Resolution number 20-19 is adopted unanimously, and I would like to move on to non-agenda items, and I want to do this relatively quickly. I would like to propose that everybody on the council just simply state what things you would like the city leadership team to evaluate for additional actions to be taken that we would then tentatively plan to discuss and take action on at the meeting on the 21st of April. So I'm going to get us started. I'm going to take chair prerogative for a moment. Things I've either heard, experienced, or have gotten feedback about include the following. Backflow testing of sprinkler systems, either delaying or just changing, probably delaying the requirements and or just decreasing the financial burden of doing so this year. I've been experiencing, I'll just state it this way because I think it's important to be forthright, an interesting code compliance question and discussion that I'm involved in now where people that I might need to resolve it are not available to work. So I think we need to look at that. I've also heard multiple things about utility bills. One community in Oregon is trying to support their local businesses by allowing people to, if they purchase more than $20 worth of food from a local restaurant, they then end up with a $10 utility bill credit, and they can have up to 3 credits per month. I think we should look at that. I also, to Councilor Lube's point earlier on utility billing, I think we may need to evaluate whether there should be some sort of a program to support or forgive utility bills for people that are either unemployed or I don't know what the right criteria would be, but we could throw that to the staff to consider. Those are the top things on my list of stuff, but let's start with Councillor Lube. What do you want to throw out there?
Thank you. About the utility sort of thing and figuring out a way to support our residents who are struggling to pay bills. I think that's an important part of it. I think this discussion we're having also makes me think in a broader city way. I think the staff has done a really great job at continuing to try to do business as usual, but I think that we need to actually start looking through the lens of this crisis and pandemic that's going on and looking at the city services. I don't think we can continue business as usual. I think we need to figure out what does the public need and how do we provide that. To sort of speak to what the mayor was talking about, I don't know if some of these code violations make the most sense. I think we need to be looking through it through this lens of what are the things that we should be focusing on to support the residents, which may not be, the regular city business. It may need to be something that's paused. And then, eventually down the road, I think we need to talk about the fact that I don't know if it's going to continue on kind of as business as usual again after this. I think it's going to be a significant recovery, and things that were in the pipeline are going to have to be something that's discussed on whether it's something that we should continue to move forward with, so on and so forth. And I think that's going to be part of the budget discussion, but I think that needs to be something that we're looking much more forward out. But I would just say that I hope the staff looks through it from the lens of this crisis and this pandemic, and what are we doing to support the residents at this time? Because I don't know if business as usual and providing all of the services is necessarily what we need to be focused on right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I like your suggestions. I would just ask maybe some of our departments, especially the police department and the public works department, if they have needs that have changed that we could help them out with. I don't know of anything on the top, but they might have an idea.
Okay, excellent. Councillor Newton.
Yeah, I appreciate what Councillor Anderson just said. Those people are out on the front lines, and there may be something we can do to assist them, or things that they're seeing out in the community that need assistance immediately. I am also hearing concern about utilities. Some people are saying, if I could have a little bit of help, it's just I can't seem to get ahead. So some way to give people some relief, whether it's total relief or just a little bit of help with utilities, I'm hearing. And also, sort of related, but to follow up a little bit on Councillor Lube's point, I think we need to look as a council, we've got goals and we've asked staff to, move forward pretty, we've got a lot on their plates that we're asking them to do. And we are going to probably be investing immediately, like we just did tonight, some of our resources in a COVID-19 response. I don't know that it's going to be a light switch flicking, that we just all of a sudden we're out of it and we don't have ongoing impacts in the community. So I also think soon there needs to be a discussion, whether it's at budget time or before, where we take a look at some of the other things that we're working on, and maybe we need to hit a pause, because we just can't continue to fund them to the level we have. Just something I think we need to take a look at. So.
Okay. Council President Goodhouse.
I was gonna say that just for us to keep reaching out to the citizens, maybe make more of a push that we want to hear from you and get more people submitting what's going on. I mean, we're hearing little bits, but maybe try to find out a way to have more people communicate in what they're going through, what they see they're experiencing, what they'd like to have help with, or what they need help with. And I would just like to, as I kind of hinted on before, I think if something comes up there, any kind of big items, we figure out a way that we can, as a council, either staff talks to us individually, or figure out how we can get information out a little bit more. There's a lot of things coming and going so quickly, but some of this stuff might be really important that we want to figure out how we can really get to that as a council. But I think just staying in touch with our citizens, our businesses, and seeing what we can do to help them and what's going on. I think right now people really want to see the city and want to see that we're there and we're listening, and we just need to keep that going.
Youth Councillor Turley.
I think we see a lot of people working from home now, and I think trying to do something to ensure that they have broadband access in a way that's accessible to them, if that's not something that they are able to afford or an easy utility for them, I think trying to come up with a solution to have some sort of like public broadband source that's easily accessible would be helpful.
Council,
Okay.
I think that's a good point. I agree with that as well.
Okay. City Manager Wine, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'm assuming that you guys have, based on my prompt, have taken notes and can take a look at those things and perhaps circle back with each councilor over the next week or two and try to have a more comprehensive set of actions ready for a future but soon meeting. Is that reasonable?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've also been taking notes. I know that some of the staff who are on the meeting tonight are going to be helpful. It sounds like you would like at least a report back to the council at your meeting of the 21st, and we can do that. I will loop back with each councilor individually just to be sure I have an understanding or better definition of what you have in mind. So thank you for this. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say that to the extent that we can actually move any of those such that we could take action on the 21st, I think we need to try to be as prompt and action oriented as possible, though I know that, you know, these are complicated topics and difficult to put together quickly, but I would just push to try to do that as best we can.
We'll do our best. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that said, the Tigard City Council will go into executive session to discuss labor negotiations under ORS 192.660 subsection 2 D as in dog. All discussions are confidential and those present may disclose nothing from the session. Representatives of the news media are allowed to attend executive sessions as provided by ORS 192.660 subsection 4, but must not disclose any information discussed. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. The City Council will adjourn at the conclusion of the executive session. Thank you and good night.